Ambassador Elena Reyes had negotiated ceasefires on 3 continents before her 40th birthday, but nothing in 30 years of diplomatic service had prepared her for a table with only 2 chairs, one of which was occupied by something that had never, in its species' recorded history, lost an argument. The Vantrel Compact called itself a diplomatic power, and by most measures it was. 43 star systems bound not by conquest but by contract, by treaty, by the careful, patient art of negotiating everything into submission. The Vantrel did not send fleets first. They sent words. Words, Ambassador Thessaly Korr liked to say, cost nothing and conquered everything, provided you knew how to use them. Korr had negotiated the surrender of the Ithran colonies without firing a shot. Had talked the Duran Ascendancy into ceding 2 entire star systems over the course of a single afternoon by convincing them, correctly, that resistance would cost more than compliance. Had built a career, a reputation, an entire philosophy of conquest around one simple, unbreakable principle: every negotiation has a bluff. Find it. Call it. Win. You understand, Korr said, settling into the chair across from Reyes with the unhurried ease of someone who had done this 1100 times before, that this meeting is a formality. Your planet's resources have already been catalogued. Your defensive capabilities have already been assessed. What we are doing here today is agreeing on terms, not on outcomes. Reyes said nothing. She set a single folder on the table between them, unopened, and folded her hands over it. I've read your file, Ambassador, Reyes said finally. 1104 successful negotiations. 0 losses. Impressive record. It is not luck, Korr said. It is method. Every species I have ever sat across from has, eventually, revealed the thing they are most afraid to lose. Once I know what that is, the negotiation is already finished. We are simply discussing paperwork. And what do you think we're afraid to lose? Korr studied her for a long moment, the way a chess player studies a board 3 moves before the opponent realizes the game is already over. Your species is fractured, Korr said. Competing nations, competing ideologies, a history soaked in your own wars. You are afraid of exactly what every fractured species fears, that any resistance will cost you more than you can bear, and that you will bear it alone, because your neighbors will not stand with you. I do not need weapons, Ambassador. I need only to remind you what you already believe about yourselves. That's a good read, Reyes said. Wrong. But good. Something flickered behind Korr's dark, patient eyes, not quite doubt, not yet, but the first faint crack in 1104 consecutive victories. Then enlighten me, Korr said. You're going to threaten us with your fleet, Reyes said. Standard opening move. You'll tell me it's in orbit, that resistance is measured in minutes, that the humane thing to do is sign now and spare our cities. Then you'll offer terms that sound generous compared to that threat but are actually just theft with better paperwork. That's move 1. Should I keep going, or do you want to skip to move 2? For the first time in a very long career, Ambassador Thessaly Korr did not immediately respond. You have done this before, Korr said slowly. No, Reyes said. But my grandmother did. Different table, different century, different species entirely, but the shape of the room is always the same. I've read transcripts of negotiations going back 700 years. Colonial treaties. Trade agreements signed at gunpoint and dressed up as partnerships. Ceasefires that gave the winning side everything and called it compromise. You didn't invent this playbook, Ambassador. My species has been running it on itself since before we had written language. We just usually play both sides. Korr's expression did not change, not visibly, not in any way a lesser observer would have caught. But Reyes had spent 30 years reading faces across negotiating tables, and she saw it anyway, the almost imperceptible recalibration of someone realizing, for the first time, that the opponent across from them had already read the whole book. Very well, Korr said, resetting. Let us speak plainly, then. There is a fleet in orbit. 40 vessels. Sufficient to reduce any of your major population centers to rubble within the hour, should this negotiation fail. I do not say this to threaten you. I say it because plain facts, correctly understood, tend to shorten negotiations considerably. How many of those 40 ships have functioning long-range sensors right now? Reyes asked. The question landed wrong, off rhythm, not the response Korr had built 1100 negotiations worth of instinct around. I do not follow the relevance. Humor me. Korr checked, more out of professional habit than genuine concern, tapping a small device at her wrist. The pause that followed was longer than it should have been. All 40, Korr said. Why would that number be in question? Because it isn't anymore, Reyes said. It was 31, 40 minutes ago. We've been quietly walking your sensor net down since your fleet entered the system, ship by ship, system by system, slowly enough that nothing looked like an attack and everything looked like background interference. You've been sitting in this room believing you hold every card, Ambassador, because that is what your species does. It assumes the game began the moment you sat down. Ours began the moment your fleet crossed the outer marker, and frankly, it began a long time before that, because we've been rehearsing this exact conversation against each other for most of our recorded history. There is a particular kind of silence that exists only in rooms where power has just, quietly, without a single raised voice, changed hands. It settled over the table now. You are bluffing, Korr said, but the certainty that had carried 1104 negotiations was audibly thinner than it had been 5 minutes earlier. Ambassador, Reyes said, and for the first time there was something almost gentle in her voice, the tone of someone explaining a hard truth to a person who genuinely didn't see it coming. You built your entire career on one principle. Every negotiation has a bluff, find it, call it, win. You've spent this whole meeting looking for mine. You never once stopped to ask whether I was looking for yours. Korr's device chimed softly at her wrist, an alert, small and almost polite, the kind of notification built to interrupt without alarming. She looked down at it. Read it once. Read it again, as though a second reading might change what it said. Report, she said quietly into the device. The voice that answered was strained in a way Vantrel voices rarely were. Ambassador, we are receiving telemetry indicating loss of sensor function on multiple vessels. We do not have a clear count. Command and control between ships appears degraded. How degraded? We cannot currently coordinate fleet-wide maneuvers, Ambassador. Ship-to-ship communication has fallen to approximately 40% reliability and is continuing to decline. Korr set the device down slowly, very deliberately not looking at Reyes, the way a person avoids looking at a wound before they're ready to acknowledge how badly they've been hurt. You've been dismantling my fleet's coordination for 40 minutes, Korr said, while sitting across a table discussing terms of surrender. I've been doing it for considerably longer than 40 minutes, Reyes said. 40 minutes is just how long it took to get to 31 ships. We started the moment you announced your approach, 3 days ago. You spent those 3 days composing your opening statement. We spent them mapping every frequency your fleet uses, every handshake protocol between your ships, every weak point in a communications architecture that, frankly, was built for a species used to negotiating with people who'd already decided to lose. This is an act of war, Korr said, and there was real heat in it now, the first crack of genuine emotion in a career built on never showing any. No, Reyes said. This is exactly what you told me it was, 40 minutes ago. Plain facts, correctly understood, tend to shorten negotiations considerably. Your fleet can't coordinate. It can't fire information. It can't even confirm to itself how many ships it currently has functional sensors on. Every single thing that made 40 warships an unstoppable threat was never the ships, Ambassador. It was the coordination between them. And coordination is just information moving where it's supposed to go. We're very, very good at making sure information doesn't move where it's supposed to go. We've had a great deal of practice, mostly on each other. Korr sat back, and for a long moment said nothing at all, running the calculus she had run 1100 times before on 1100 different species, only to find, for the first time in a 3-century career, that the numbers didn't resolve the way they were supposed to. What do you want? Korr said finally. Not a demand. A genuine question, asked by someone who had just realized she no longer knew the shape of the conversation she was in. I want you to understand something before you leave this room, Reyes said, because I think it will save both our species a great deal of trouble going forward. You've spent 300 years winning negotiations by finding the thing a species is most afraid to lose. You looked at us and saw fractured nations, old wars, old grudges, and you assumed that fear was our weakness. It's not. It's our curriculum. Every single thing you were planning to do to us today, Ambassador, the threats, the false generosity, the careful architecture of a surrender dressed up as a treaty, we have already done to ourselves, over and over, for thousands of years. We didn't fear this negotiation. We recognized it. And a species that recognizes the playbook doesn't need to be afraid of the player. You could have simply told me this at the start, Korr said, something almost like exhaustion in her voice now. Saved us both considerable time. I could have, Reyes agreed. But you needed to feel 1104 wind slipping through your fingers in real time, Ambassador, or you'd have walked out of this room still believing the next species would fall for it. Some lessons only land if you feel them happen. The device at Korr's wrist chimed again, more insistent this time. She read it without picking it up. Sensor and communication function is being restored, the voice on the other end reported, relief evident even through the strain. Gradually. We do not yet understand the mechanism. You'll get it back, Reyes said, before Korr could ask. All of it? Slowly, over the next several hours, as your fleet withdraws to the system's edge. We're not interested in destroying 40 ships and starting a war neither of us can afford. We're interested in you going home and telling the rest of the Compact something true for the first time in 3 centuries of expansion. And what is that? That Earth isn't the easy annexation your scouts reported, Reyes said. That we're not a fractured, frightened species waiting for someone to tell us how afraid to be. We're a species that has already survived every trick you were planning to use on us, because we invented most of them first, and turned them on each other for longer than your Compact has existed. Tell them that. Tell them the negotiation playbook doesn't work here, because we wrote the first draft of it ourselves. Korr rose slowly from her chair, the unhurried ease from the start of the meeting entirely gone now, replaced by something more careful, more measured, the posture of someone recalculating everything they thought they understood about the shape of power. 1105 negotiations, Korr said quietly, almost to herself, at the door. I will need to update the number. Update the whole file, Ambassador, Reyes said, not unkindly. I think you're going to find the next several centuries require a different opening move. The Vantrel fleet withdrew from Sol System 6 hours later, sensor function restored ship by ship exactly as promised, 40 vessels retreating in loose, uncoordinated formation toward the system's edge, their crews still not entirely certain what had happened to them or how, only that whatever it was, it had happened while their most decorated diplomat sat calmly across a table, discussing terms. Word reached the Vantrel Compact's central archive within the month, filed not as a defeat, because the Compact did not have a formal category for defeat, but as an amendment. A quiet, unprecedented addendum to 1104 years of diplomatic doctrine. Species designation, human. Threat assessment, revise all previous models. Diplomatic vulnerability, none identified. Recommendation, approach future negotiations with this species not as a superior power extending terms, but as an equal, because they have already survived every strategy we intend to use, practiced against the only opponent more relentless than us. Themselves. Ambassador Thessaly Korr never negotiated with Earth again. But every Vantrel diplomat who came after her studied the transcript of that single meeting for the rest of the Compact's history, the same way a species studies its own rare and costly mistakes, carefully, thoroughly, and with the quiet understanding that some lessons only need to be learned once, provided the species learning them is honest enough to admit they'd been wrong about who was sitting across the table.